Give it a couple of seconds just to check everything's there. Okay, let me see if this is working on Periscope. Is it working? Okay, let me see if it looks like Periscope is working. This is working on Periscope. Okay, Periscope's working. Let's see if YouTube is working. YouTube, how you doing, YouTube? We're in gear here, YouTube. We're in gear here, YouTube. Okay, YouTube seems good. All right, great. Let's begin. So today we're going to be looking at different studies from peer-reviewed journals, scientific studies that just discuss psychedelics and drugs in general. And many of the conclusions of these studies will be counterintuitive. We'll kind of go against that notion that drugs are bad. Okay, they're not going to say they're great, but it goes against this idea that they're always bad. They're always bad in every situation, and they're always the most harmful things ever, right? So we're going to be looking through that. We're going to be doing that right now. Just want to remind everybody that if you chat and you let anything, I might be delayed on seeing chats, but I will be responding to chats as best to my ability. Okay, all right. And let me just see, make sure. Okay, all right. So now I can see all the chats. So if anyone has any questions, put it in the chat, and then we can continue now. Great. All right. So the first study that I'm going in alphabetical order. So I got like 46 studies, and we're going to go through a good number of them. So the first one I have here is a study that looks at the effects of ecstasy on the users, right? And so what it concludes is that there are several areas where there seems to be like deficits, meaning like problems, issues with using ecstasy. So for instance, cognitive skill, vision, and certain aspects of your neurohormonal functioning, mostly related to stress. And then the fetal development, but that that goes without saying. Pregnant women shouldn't be taking substances like that. So but here's the thing that's interesting, right? Is as it says here, variance levels are high. Can you guys see how I highlighted that? All right, cool. Variance levels are high. What that means is that although there seems to be like definite effects, how much these effects actually hit people, how they actually like affect people, right? Varies highly. Where it seems like some people it's really bad for them, and while others it doesn't seem too bad for them. So if we could see over here. They're like, okay, what would be the difference, because what would cause the difference in, these, in people's effects, or, what they call biological variation. And, besides the fact that many people, most of these studies don't check to see if, like, they're only using MDMA, or sometimes people think they're using MDMA, but it really isn't, or there seems to be some situations where people are more inclined to say they do more than they do, or opposite. So self-reporting is one of the least reliable ways of coming to information in science, in psychology. And so that's something that may be the big reason here why there's a variation. But the interesting thing is, if it was true that MDMA always caused it, then we should see it more across the board. We shouldn't see this much variation. And so I think what they brought up here is that what could be the difference, that some people it's worse than others, would be things like frequency of use, how you use it, like taking it orally versus injecting it or sniffing it, whether or not you take it with other drugs. They also brought up this interesting thing I didn't know before about the HPA axis, right, which deals with cortisol, the stress hormone, and they find that people who take MDMA have higher instances of cortisol, 400% higher than non-users in one study. So they believe that because of the higher cortisol, that may be the aspect that's causing the damage. Not the MDMA itself, but that the fact that it indirectly releases cortisol in large amounts. I mean, 400% over averages, and this is after the experience. This isn't while on MDMA. While on MDMA, it could be as high as 800 times higher than your average. But, when you're not on it, regular users have 400 times higher. But we're going to see other studies that kind of like contradict this idea that that people who use MDMA are very stressful or something, because that's how science is. Another issue they point to is oxytocin, that may become altered when you use too much MDMA, and that may lead to problems later on. So, in summary, we'll just read the summary here. MDMA remains a popular drug despite its many long-term negative consequences with repeated use. Also, recreational use is still a problem in the public concern, and there's been an increase in MDMA-related deaths and an increase in how strong the tabs are. Like, now I think like you have averages of 150, 200 milligrams per pill, which is too much. It's too much, especially for first-time users. You really shouldn't need more than 100 or 120 milligrams at once. You really don't need more than that. Anyway, you have problems like that all over the place, and you have problems associated with serotonin. So basically, they're just saying that there are problems, but the problems aren't consistent, and that there seems to be some groups of people who the problems of taking ecstasies aren't that much of an issue, and then there seems to be people who it's a huge issue for. So obviously, as they said, they need more research to figure out what makes certain people different. Like they speculated a bit about cortisol. So for instance, if you have people who are less prone to stress versus more prone to stress, that may be the difference there. So that is basically the outcome of the study. So let's go into a different study. Because we got 40-something studies. And I don't want to go through all of them. Some of them I don't have to get into that much detail with them, Okay, this one's interesting. This one's about acquired synesthesia, right? So remember synesthesia, right? Let me just make sure you can see that, right? Okay. Synesthesia is basically when someone has a mixing of senses, like they hear sounds, they hear shapes, right? They can hear things like that. And so, for instance, you could taste shapes. You can hear colors, right? There's a guy that was documented. He had the ability to, every time he heard someone's name, he would taste something. So I remember he said one person's name tasted like earwax, right? So anyway, that's called synesthesia. 2CB is an analog of mescaline that I have used on, Periscope before, and that is that's a substance that's similar to LSD, but it's not as intense mentally, and it is more closer to MDMA in its empathetic effects. Like it makes people feel very social, much more than normal. It gives you the visual scape of LSD with the hallucinations and everything, but it gives you the heartscape or the feeling of sociability. Much more than LSD, but definitely not as much as MDMA. Anyway, so it seems that there is a case here of one guy using 2CB, and then right after that he had a permanent case of synesthesia. This is amazing. So I could totally get this because I have had synesthesic experiences on 2CB. As I recorded when I said I was hearing someone walking, I wasn't seeing them, but I was hearing them, their footsteps, and it felt that the footsteps were like being interpreted as like a stained glass window, where each step was like a color, and they were all like in a pattern with each other. It was quite beautiful the way it the pitter patter was like a light show. But obviously I don't feel that now. So the fact that someone has a permanent synesthesia following that, I mean, I would kind of like that, to tell you the truth. I would like that, but then it could be very disorienting if it's very strong. But here it is, a case of someone getting that. So let's go to another one. Oh, this one's cool. This study deals with the benefits of microdosing. So, it basically finds that you have some effects of it that are pretty good. Our results suggest a beneficial relationship where an experience with microdosing is associated with lower dysfunctional attitudes and negative emotionality and higher wisdom, open-mindedness, and creativity. The most popular substances used to microdose were LSD and psilocybin, and no other significant differences based on substance were found in our So basically they're saying that there's no real difference between dosing LSD or psilocybin as a microdose, and that they both have the same level of benefit. And the benefits are like basically you're more emotionally stable, you have a better attitude, and you're more, they say higher wisdom. I would assume that has to do with like maybe your ability to deal with things as they are, right? Like the wisdom of like, being happy in spite of negative things. That might be it. So let me continue here. We found our the qualitative benefits and drawbacks collected in this survey may yet reveal substance-based effects. Hypotheses predicting perceived importance of microdosing from dose-related practices were unsupported. And optimal dose scheduling remains an open question. So that's an interesting. So basically, they found no relationship between the dose you take as a microdose and how effective it is. So it's not like it's like there's a best dose for everybody, or even for your average person. There isn't. It seems to be very, very subjective to how much a person needs and how much works for them. So basically you would have to, if you want to do this, you would have to do some exploring on your own, trying different microdoses to see which would be the best for you. So also, microdosers also were more aware of their emotions. Although they were more aware of their emotions, people who microdose did not have intense emotions. Does that make sense? That you can notice when you're feeling bad or sad more intimately, but it's not overwhelming to you. Taken together, these findings suggest that placebo-controlled studies of microdosing were warranted to investigate the causal efficacy. So they're saying basically there's enough evidence here to go forward, right? To look further, like there's promise here. The higher wisdom, right? So basically what this study did, right, was they surveyed before and after people who, they surveyed people who microdose and people who don't microdose, right? So people self-reported their microdosing behaviors on an online questionnaire, okay? And so what they found was that after all these people who, how many was it? Well, they should tell you. By the way, the correlations are pretty big. Like 0.92. So for instance, dysfunctional attitudes. The R is 0.92. That's a very high R. For even in behavioral studies, that's huge. So, look at 0.8, 0.6, this one's small. Creativity is only 0.1. That's actually a moderate correlation. These are extreme correlations. 0.67 is considered a high, a strong correlation. And they're obviously they're negative, right? So if it's wisdom, it's positively correlated, 0.88. Remember, this is all microdosing. Now, obviously, there's issues with this. This is self-reporting, but I think it's interesting nonetheless. When you still, even with the self-report, you still see the pattern emerge. Of people who take it and people who don't take it, So promising initial evidence. So definitely we need more studies here, but this is good. This is good. This doesn't prove it without a shadow of doubt that it's good for us or that it's beneficial, but it shows a lot of promise that it will be. Let me see, what's this over here? Oh, this is how many subscribers there are to Reddit. They bring up here Reddit and microdosing Reddit. That's why they did the study, by the way. It was on the microdosing Reddit. Look, they talk about why people would even want to do microdosing. They said that they want to get the benefits of tripping, but without the potential of a bad trip. See, it says here, 39% of participants rated their psychedelic experiences, full doses, as one of the top 5 most challenging experiences of their lifetime. Not just most memorable, but challenging. And it's challenging. Anyone knows what a bad trip is not really. It shouldn't be called bad. It should be called difficult. Challenging is a good word too. It is a challenge because you learn a lot. And the trips you have that are fun and easygoing, they're great. And they make you, they contribute to your overall well-being in the short term, at least. But the ones that actually you remember and that have more value to you, that you learned the most from, which if you take psychedelics, you're really taking it to learn. You're not just taking it to have fun, because psychedelics aren't the greatest drug just to have fun, although they can be pretty fun. But you want to usually take it with the attitude of learning something. And so usually the experiences that are the most fruitful for how they influence your life and your behavior and your character and your outlook are usually the ones that are the most difficult. And so you really can't get away from that. But yeah, so let's go to another one. This one's pretty interesting. If it opens, there we go. So this is if you guys could see it there already. See it yet? Should be able to see it by now, but this is from the Journal of Theoretical and Philosophical Psychology. These are psychologists who write on philosophy through the lens of psychology, right? Basically, and so the article is Altered States of Consciousness, and it asks, is this a natural gateway to an ecological civilization? And so what they argue here, what the author, I think it's only one author, right? Let me see. Yeah, it's one. It's Peter Brace. Yeah, it's one author. So one of the things here is he argues is that different kinds of styles in the brain contribute to our understanding of change. So, in conclusion, there is evidence from biology, botany, and human history, right? Botany being like psychedelics, and philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience, that psychedelics can bring about lasting and positive change that may help us move toward a way of living that is founded on care for our global home. A more ecological civilization. It's probably climate change is brought up here. As I have briefly discussed, many human cultures have placed some hallucinogenic substance at the foundation of their understanding of their place in nature and how they interact with the rest of the natural world, as Samari asserted, used under appropriate conditions, that is, in particular environmental and psychological settings. Psychedelic substances induce experiences accompanied by profound emotional and intuitive states that can be illuminating and revelatory. The elaboration and interpretation of these experiences continue to develop contribute to the development of both individual and societal interpretations of reality. In support of further investigation into these phenomena, these two explained, the present research adds to the contemporary literature on the beneficial effects of psychedelic substances use on mental well-being, hinting at a novel area for future research. Investigating their potentially positive effects on a societal level. He talks about when LSD was made, and he talks about what Hoffman said about the promise of LSD. And then he talks about, well, if there's a huge potential, what's the problem? Then, he asks, could psychedelics beneficially be considered in similar roles? And roles like things that, like initiatory rites, parts of psychotherapy, getting, basically something that you only take during important events in your life. Surely, due to the potential benefits of these substances, but also considering their disruptive power, a great deal more research should be done. Obviously, it's just like fucking scientists always. There's always more research. But okay, but here's the point in the article that I take home, right? Is that it may be possible to use psychedelics on a mass scale in order to influence people towards a certain kind of worldview. Now, I believe this should be done voluntarily and should be done in where people have the right to change their minds and have different schools of thought, right, so to speak. But a big application of this that I think is Christians. And in religion, really, but Christians, being Christian, I see it them first, that they can use these as these substances as tools to make people understand in a deeper way the God's word. Because sometimes in this world where word and text on a page can be very bland to people, especially when there's movies and all this stuff, that when you have psychedelic experience, you step into the meaning of the text that you're focusing on, let's say, and it becomes more novel and new and understanding to you. That's why a lot of times when people trip, they'll say like like some kind of like old saying, like what comes up must come down. What goes up must come down. Like they'll keep repeating something like that, and it's because they're finding a new, deeper meaning to it, where they've always noticed it, but they didn't really consider it. It's the same thing with the word and people and their religion, because people they've heard the word, God died for your sins a million times, but do they really understand what that means? And a psychedelic experience, if it's structured in a proper way, can contribute to this. And again, as I said millions of times, it is not a coincidence that the few psychedelic religions that last more than a generation, like the one in Brazil that's been going on since the 30s, right? These religions are all Christian based. They're not, they're not biblically Christian in the sense that they match everything the right way with theology, but they are centered around Christ, Holy Spirit, centered around the Bible. So, to me, it's no coincidence that the most successful psychedelic religions are the ones that adhere mostly to Christianity. I think that's very important to understand, because you don't have any other, like for instance, if you look at like Wiccan or something, there's tons of controversy about, when to do what drug, if to do any at all. Same thing with chaos magic. It's the same idea, although I don't really call that a religion. But there is a certain disagreement, and so you don't have a kind of like generational tradition of taking a psychedelic in like a Wiccan or a cult setting. Again, they do that, of course, but there's no like continual tradition of it. It's very. Think of Aleister Crowley, right? Like he didn't leave a bunch of disciples. He just came through, burned everything, and then literally fizzled out. Like he didn't leave structures behind. He just took everything. That's how you know he was not of God. He didn't create. Although he wrote a lot, but he wasn't there to lay a foundation for anybody else to walk on. Although yes, there's organizations that were started or influenced by him, but still, this is not in the same way as someone whose real purpose is to give other people strength, not just to take their strength. Okay, let's look at another. This one's funny. This one says that if that teenagers are more likely, okay, check this out. Teenagers are more likely to have take risk behavior, right? Take risky behaviors if they're on caffeine. So if a kid drinks coffee, they're more or sugary or not sugary drinks or Monster Energy or any of these like energy drinks, if that they are more likely to take risky to make stupid decisions. I mean, I think it's funny. Now, this is only for chronic use, right? So this isn't the guy who maybe drinks 1 cup of coffee a day. This is the guy who's always drinking the Monster, right? That guy is going to have way less ability to make rational decisions. And I think this is funny because people don't think of caffeine as a drug that messes you up. And here it says that if you drink it often, a couple cups a day, a couple of Monster Energies a day, you, as a teenager, will make crappy decisions. You will take risks that are ridiculous. And so, I think this is, although, I don't think people encourage children to drink caffeine. I think many people just think that it stunts your growth or something, or it prevents you from getting a nice sleep when you're a kid. It goes much beyond that. I mean, again, teenagers who are drinking caffeine chronically will be more likely to, let's say, ride their bike without a helmet as fast as they can down a hill. And honestly, it makes sense when you realize that caffeine's a stimulant. So if you're spun up all day. Oh, by the way, this goes into sex as well. Like, they're more likely to have sex as teenagers if they're on caffeine. So for instance, average daily caffeine use would significantly positively correlate with scores on a risk-taking questionnaire. These data suggest that caffeine dose-dependent influences. That means, caffeine dose-dependent influences decision-making and risk-taking. That means that the more there's a relationship between how much caffeine you take and how many risks you take, and they're connected. They're directly connected. So the more you do of one, the more you get of the other. And this is interesting, because no one thinks of caffeine as something like, one of the arguments when people try to argue, like, well, why is this drug like caffeine legal but not weed? They'll say, well, caffeine doesn't fuck you up. Well, excuse me. Maybe not for adults, although they didn't do this study on adults. For teenagers, it fucks them up. And, for instance, if they're taking like 400 milligrams of caffeine a day, which probably is like 2 Monster Energies, they're more likely to have premarital unprotected sex, and go out and do crime or take risks. This isn't to get their dose. This is after they've taken their dose. So, balloon explosions. Look at that. That's how they tested this. They found the same between boys and girls. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not the same, inverted effect. So, previous studies have demonstrated a relationship between caffeine and risk-taking. So, look, it's for both adults and kids. Look at all the studies that suggests that taking caffeine increases risk-taking behavior. It is not evident from these studies whether the effects are acute, chronic, or both. The purpose of the study was to investigate the impact of acute caffeine on objective risk-taking in the laboratory using a double. So this is a true experiment. We found, double-blind, placebo, all that. We found that the participants who were moderate caffeine consumers had more balloon explosions. That was the test they gave them on the BART after consuming 2 mg of caffeine per kilogram of body weight. But participants who were high on caffeine consumers had fewer balloon explosions compared with placebo. There were also interactions among pubertal phase, sex, and caffeine dose on total money earned, with post-pubertal boys showing an increase in total money earned against girls showing a decrease in total money earned as caffeine dose increased. See that? So you make less money, you're less focused as you take more caffeine. Finally, using a composite risk score from the risk-taking questionnaire, we found a significant correlation between average daily caffeine use and risk-taking scores. So when taking this data together, it suggests that both acute and chronic both acute and chronic consumption of caffeine can influence risk-taking and decision-making. Say again. So both taking it often and like its immediate effects. Like let's say you never do it and you drink a lot. Both of those groups of people have increased risk-taking. We believe it is likely that acute and chronic effects of caffeine interact to influence, so that they may even interact with each other. So yeah, basically that's what the study says. So isn't that interesting? That caffeine can lead to, like, so if anyone ever asks, but caffeine's okay, it doesn't do anything to you. Well, be like, no, there's actually many studies to show that caffeine actually increases risk-taking behavior, meaning that you do stupider things and things that, and remember, when you take risks, especially when you live around other people. Sometimes those risks affect other people, such as like when you take the risk of, driving recklessly. Then you could see how, you put other people at risk. And so caffeine, if anything, it's never been shown that smoking weed increases risk taking. I don't think it has, at least not recently. So I think it might be interesting to argue, well, at least weed doesn't make you do stupid things. You may stay on your couch, but you're not going to hurt anybody. So this is interesting. Let's go to the next study here. Okay. Ooh, I like this one. Cannabis does not affect someone being a functional adult. Got that? So, so basically, studies called divergent cannabis. I don't like saying marijuana. Divergent cannabis trajectories among men, socioeconomic relationship, and life satisfaction outcomes in the mid-30s. So, conclusions. After statistically accounting for control variables, which is like, well, I'm not going to get into what controls are, but controls basically make sure that it's weed, that any effect they're looking at is from cannabis, is from weed, and not something else, like your economic status or your level of education, or some other difference between people. So they said after controlling those variables, like your economic status, chronic marijuana users were not at a heightened risk for maladjustment in adulthood, except for lower SES black men. But then again, you look at like that black men in that lower bracket of SES. They're like 5 times more likely to be in prison than anybody. Like almost a third of them have been in prison at some point. So that's not weed. That's something else there. But anyway, it shows that chronic users were more likely to have friends and partners who also used weed. So basically what they're saying here is that when you smoke weed, you're more likely to be around other people who smoke weed, and because of that, it's not like that bad. It's integrated. It's like how back in the day everyone smoked cigarettes, and it wasn't a big deal if you smoke cigarettes. Now it's like a more pushback. Like, you're going to smoke a cigarette in my house? Get out. You got to go outside. So it's the same idea here. That when people are in a community of pot smokers, it doesn't really affect them from doing functional adult things because there's no pushback. And that just shows you how superficial it really is. That any real problem from, let's say, smoking comes from other people, really. People pushing against you, like, I smell weed on you. Just like getting upset over it. And they're just getting upset for no reason because they've been conditioned to be dumbasses. Man, is this messing up now, my Periscope? Let me see. Let's see if YouTube's okay. Weed. So basically, oh man, I hate when it does this. Anyway, we'll try to get through as many as we can. Okay, there's a study that shows that cannabis does not affect your cognitive function, like your ability to think straight, after it wears off. So basically, while it's on, it's going to affect you to varying degrees, right? But once it wears off, it's over. It's over. You see? So this is really interesting on that level, right? Basically, and by the way, this is a meta-analysis too. So this is a summary of many other studies. You see? There's a summary of many other kinds of studies. So, how many studies did they use? 69 studies. They looked at 69 studies that overall show that any deficit from cannabis mentally wears off. Let me see. After 72 hours. 72 hours. So after 72 hours, it wears off. It's amazing, right? Shit. Why did I do that? Oh no, I got it back. Good. Hold on. I think, let me see. Where's the encoder? I've heard something about like an encoder should be brought down. That my encoder, video, render, color space. something about, like, I remember reading, like, if I put down the encoder, output? Encoder. So, let's see, it's at Harvard. Does that work? Is that better? Is that better at all? Does that work? I think it might work. Huh. Let me see. Let me put it down to 2,000. What happens? Does it work now? Oh no, I got it back. Good. Hold on. I think. Okay, does that work? Let me see. Hello. So they put it down at 2,000. What happened? Hello. Anyway, I'll just continue with this. Hopefully the bit rate's down. Thank you for the heart. All right, so I hope something. I hope someone hears me. All right, so all right, I'll just continue on. Well, remember that this is going to be put up right on YouTube. So the YouTube version is going to be more, put together. Damn, the bit rate's so low. Hold on, I got to put up the bit rate. I'm sorry. I just realized, like, this looks horrible. Let me see output. Does that work better? Fuck. Like I said, I am not a wizard with this shit. I suck with this. I really do. Sorry, guys. I'll just make that bigger, though. I could kind of cut over my head. I don't mind. Hello. Okay. I'll just continue with this. So this study is actually really important. And, it's important because it shows us it's one of the best versions of a study. It's longitudinal twin study. So basically, it looks at pairs of twins over their lives, and it's two studies of it, and they both show that cannabis does not diminish IQ. So there was no evidence of a dose-responsive relation between frequency of use and IQ change. See that? There's no difference between frequency of use and IQ change. So we could see that the twins, so if one twin started smoking weed, a lot of weed, and the other twin did not, there was no difference later on in their IQ. They didn't drop in IQ. They didn't have a difference in IQ. Just make that. Hold on, let me try something. Does that work? I hope someone could hear me now. I don't know if that messes everything up, but it's the best I can do right now because I want you guys to see some of this, and I gotta get through some of them. So hopefully you can see this. All right. So yeah, so no difference in IQ change between twins that use weed and don't use weed. So this is a longitudinal twin. They looked at twins over a long period of time, from before they smoked weed to a long time after they started smoking weed regularly, and they find amazingly no difference in IQ. So it's not making people dumber. Okay? It's not making people dumber. All right? So let's go to the next one here. The harm from cannabis is overstated. So it says here, associations between cannabis use and cognitive functioning may be of questionable clinical importance for most individuals. Furthermore, abstinence of longer than 72 hours diminishes the effects. So basically there's no effects from weed on your mind after 3 days, none at all. And the prior studies that talked about like huge problems with weed and mental ability have all been exaggerated. The last study I just showed you guys was a twin study, 2 twin studies, that show that if one twin smokes weed a lot and the other one doesn't smoke any, there was no difference in IQ. No difference in IQ. So all the people who say, oh yeah, this makes you dumb. Obviously, it doesn't. Here's a study on how psychedelics help people who use alcohol stop consuming it. So basically, it helps people in their addiction to alcohol. So let's see, what's the results? Most reported taking a moderate or high dose of LSD or psilocybin, followed by a significant reduction in alcohol consumption. They said, after the psychedelic experience, 83% of people did not meet the alcohol use disorder criteria. %, of them endorsed psychedelic-associated changes in life priorities or values. Check this out. The higher the dose of psychedelic and the more mystical insight you've had, the more likely the experience was going to reduce your alcohol consumption. See? Personal meaning of experiences were associated with a greater reduction in alcohol consumption, controlling for prior alcohol consumption and related distress. So it's not related to how much they did it before or how much they were in distress. Like how much, because you could imagine, the people who took the highest doses maybe were the most desperate. No, it wasn't that way at all. They weren't the most desperate. So it was a great study here. Very, very influential, for people who are stuck in the ruts of alcohol addiction. So basically, crackheads don't have such bad differences in their mental ability than normal people. Data suggests that long-term cocaine users have similar cognitive functioning to matched controls when tested under drug-free conditions, obviously when they're not high. So it says here that smoking crack does not mess up your mind. It can mess up your life, but your brain's fine. Look, the only problem they get is marginal decreases in verbal learning. So they are less likely to learn new words and things like that. They're less likely to learn new ways of talking. That's, but that's marginal, though. Marginal decreases and all that. This is amazing. Absolutely amazing. It's let's do a few more, because look, we got a lot here, so I don't think we're going to be able to get through them. But this one's pretty interesting. This deals with coffee and coworkers. That when coworkers have coffee together, helped everyone work harder together. So not only do you want to, like, if when you drink coffee and then you go join a group activity, not only are you more, you're more motivated to contribute more to the group. Not only that, but you are more likely to give other group members more of a positive, the more caffeinated you are, the more likely you are to give a positive performance rating to someone else. So this is interesting. So that means if you're going to get a performance rating from your employer, and they're doing it offhand,